Hey guys, it's Ramey Outdoors and welcome back to Fishing College. Something that I struggled a lot and actually occasionally do struggle with is whenever I go into any kind of tackle store, I'm always asking myself, what the heck am I supposed to buy? And today we're going to talk about that because trust me, as a beginner, you don't need half of this stuff, especially the stuff that I'm holding right now. We're going to go over a select couple of presentations and lures, and we're just going to talk about them today in a 100 level video and what you should probably look at buying and filling your tackle box with before you move on to anything else. Remember to go ahead and like and subscribe, and let's get to it. So this first one is probably going to be to no surprise to you at all, and that is going to be a Cenko. And some of you are probably telling yourselves, wow, this video is really stupid, shouldn't have clicked on it. It's a Cenko. The main reason that I'm suggesting something like this is because not only is it simple, but it is highly, highly effective for any kind of fishing scenario that you might be in. The reason being is because if you have two different types of hooks, an EWG and a wacky hook. The wacky hook is basically just a very small circle hook. Next, you have your EWG. I would recommend having a 1/0 or a 3/0 size, and that's basically as big as you need for a 5-inch stick bait like this. And with this, you can rig it in two different ways, probably a couple of more, but we're only going to be going into this in this 100 level video. The first is going to be your simple Texas rig. First, let's go ahead and start by piercing that and coming up through. So that is the first part of that Texas rig. Next, come and push it up until it is up onto that shank. Next, let's go ahead and bend that plastic a little bit and pierce it. And then come up and make sure it's nice and straight. And that right there is your perfect Texas rig. And that is a weedless Texas rig. So I can go over this and not get hooked on that hook. If I wanted to, I can pierce it out a little bit to where whenever that fish bites a little bit more, it's going to have an actual easy catch on it. But that is the first way and the most common way that you're going to be able to rig this. Next, there's two ways that you can rig this, and it is called the wacky rig. So go ahead and get one of those wacky hooks. The first way that you can rig this is going to be what a lot of people are not going to recommend because it will rip a lot of your soft plastics and it's just not very economical. So the first way is that you just find the middle bend of this rig and then you pierce this with the hook right dead center just like that. And boom, you have your wacky rig right there. Now, that's what a lot of people will not recommend, and that is just because it is going to rip the soft plastic more often than not. So, get yourself a wacky tool, and usually these will have O-rings right here. So, all you would do is just insert your worm right there, and take this little banding tool, slide it up until it is on there. If you have to adjust it, that's completely fine. Next, take your wacky hook and slide it up under that band, and boom. That is what most people is going to call your true wacky rig. If you want to, you can take a nail weight and you can insert it on the inside and you can create what's called a Cenko rig, which I will make a separate video on eventually. But let's go ahead and move on to the next actual lure and something that a lot of you probably may not necessarily be expecting. So let's get to it. This next lure, you're gonna have to kind of ask yourself, what kind of applications am I gonna be using this for? Do I have more blowdowns or do I have more like open space to where I'm gonna be throwing stuff more like on a muddy bottom, rocky bottom, things like that? So depending on which one you are gonna say here, that is the one that you're gonna go with. You have a football jig and you have a structure jig. So what's the key difference? The football jig is going to look more like a football that has been turned sideways. So an American football turned sideways. That is what the head is going to look like. And everyone's going to call it a football jig because that is what it is called. You're not going to have, a chatterbait versus a thunder cricket. It is going to be called a football jig. And the reason that you want to go with a football jig is because they are great to be hopped on the ground. And the reason for that is the actual head. Because of the head shape and the head weight, it is going to fall head first. And if you have a trailer on it, which I highly recommend that you do, those trailers, the appendages, are going to be up. And if you've ever seen a crawfish, when they are in a defensive position, their pincers are going to be up. So this is going to look very natural to any kind of bass that might be feeding. So think about it. Crawfish, appendages up, bass is going to want to come in and eat it because it looks like it's actual forage. Next, this structure jig is if you're going to be throwing it more into blowdowns, or if you have like docks or things like that. And that is because it has a gentle sloping head with a very thick weed guard. And that weed guard is going to keep it from getting hung up on all kinds of things. So let's say that this is a branch. If it's falling, it's just going to slide off with that weed guard. If it gets into some brush or anything like that, it's just going to deflect off with that weed guard. And because of the actual head shape, that is going to allow it to fall at a consistent rate that is going to look a lot more like a type of prey for that bass to eat. So depending on what type of structure or lack thereof you're going to be throwing in, you either want to go with a structure jig or a football jig. So that's our second lure. Let's hop into our third. This next one is going to be something that a lot of you probably write off as just being a beginner lure, but I have caught absolute hogs off of this. I've caught almost 7-pound bass off of it, relatively regular, at least during the fall, spring, and summer. And it's something that is wonderful for any kind of cloudy weather or any times that there's a little bit of chop in the water. So never write this lure off. Anyone who's been fishing for a long time understands that big bass love to eat this. And that is a spinnerbait. It is something that any beginner can easily pick up and they can throw and understand in just a matter of only a few minutes. And that is the one thing that I really love about it. Because if you have a slow, consistent retrieve where it is coming right off the bottom, that's wonderful. If you have it somewhere in the middle of the water column, absolutely wonderful. It's going to get smoked. If you have it around cover, if you have it around any kind of grass lines, you can throw this thing anywhere and it will get absolutely smoked by a bass. So understanding what kind of spinnerbait you have is relatively important, but I'm going to make a video about that relatively soon. And that has to do with the type of blades. This one in particular, these are willow blades. And these willow blades, they more work on the actual glint factor. So say that you have a bunch of light that's coming through those clouds and it's relatively clear-ish or dingy water, you might want to be throwing a willow blade or a double willow blade to have a bunch of shine factor. A lot of you are probably asking, why are there 2 hooks on this? And that is because it is called a trailer hook. So what a trailer hook is occasionally these fish will soft bite or short bite, and they will basically nip at the trailer or they will nip relatively short. So what that trailer hook is there for is if they short bite, they're still going to get hooked. I almost always run a trailer hook over some kind of actual trailer. So if you're not running a trailer hook, give it a try. Trust me, you'll get better hookups and you will get better bites consistently. So go pick up a spinnerbait. They're not that expensive. This one is the Strike King Tour grade. It automatically comes with a trailer hook. It has a longer skirt. They are usually double willow blades and they have a big giant head. And they typically last a little bit longer than the regular Strike King spinnerbaits. So go check them out. Several of y'all have probably already seen this on other anglers' lists, at least for beginners, but I'm putting a little bit of a twist on it. And that is going to be a crankbait, but in particular, it is going to be these hybrid style. Every brand has their own particular name for it, but I'm going to be using the Strike King Hybrid Hunter. And the reason that these are really great is because these are absolutely wonderful and made to be around grass. So, because of this like little 90-degree bend going into a flat round bill, it is going to glide off of cover. However, it is going to have a very erratic hunting action, on top of the fact that it has big BBs in there. So it's not going to have that like glassy rattling sound. It's going to have a much more thorough and thick sound. So ultimately, I think that these are going to be a much better pond crankbait than anything else on the market. And I'm not sponsored by Strike King. Trust me, I wish I was. They're a wonderful company. They make some really great stuff. But This is going to be something that I absolutely adore, is these hybrid hunter style crankbaits. Anytime that I'm throwing anything in any kind of pond, I'm always going to be eyeing this and wondering, are there a bunch of bait fish that are cruising around and wanting to get swallowed? Or are those bass wanting something a little bit slower and I more start leaning back towards that wacky rig? Or I lean towards that football jig? So there's kind of a reason that I'm recommending these couple of lures, because depending on what type of thinking that you're looking at, you can always bounce back to one or the other. But a crankbait, it's a super easy lure. You throw it back, you retrieve, you can pause it, it rises up in the water to where you can retrieve it back again and it dives. And check out these hybrid style crankbaits. The Strike King Hybrid Hunter, it's wonderful. I'm gonna have it linked down below for you guys to go check out, but give it a try. Last but not least, let's talk about one of my favorite just throw and reel it back lures of all time. And that is going to be the Patroller. The Whopper Plopper is something that I can't say enough good things about it. That plopping action that it has from this mechanism, and the fact that it's a sound that I think every angler absolutely loves, is that brrr sound from across the top of the water. A little bit of a fun fact, these actually started as musky baits, and bass fishermen later adopted them because they realized how much bass also went for them. So the Whopper Plopper or the Patroller, whatever you want to call it, is a wonderful topwater for any beginner. It floats, it has an amazing action, it's a very easy action. The one downside for this is the fact that it is a gunk magnet. It's a mechanism reliant bait, and it has 2 treble hooks. So that is something that you probably have to be on the lookout for, and you can't get too close to any kind of structure. So knowing that, you have to throw these a little bit more, I don't want to say open water, but you can't really get them too close to a lot of structure. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. And these things are not cheap. They're usually anywhere between $10 and $15 for a bait. So that's why I was ultimately hesitant to put this in the video. But as a topwater, it's hard to beat it, man. When they're hitting topwater, they are hitting topwater. So give these Patrollers a try, because, well, once you get addicted to a topwater strike, you are addicted to them. Something that a lot of you are probably also going to be asking is, what colors should I be buying? And yes, there are a lot of situations where this is going to be different. Say that you have like a Hellgrammite that's in your lake that is like a brownish color. Go for that. Match that hatch and throw what those bass are eating. If they're absolutely eating up some kind of fluorescent pink bug that I've never heard of, throw that. But ultimately, something that you should be looking at is keeping it simple. The colors that I mostly throw and own are going to be white, black and blue, green pumpkin, and in the springtime especially, red and black. Those are really going to be the only colors that I own or buy or throw on a regular basis. There will be occasional times where, you know, it's during the shad spawn or it's during post-spawn, things like that, where I'm going to be throwing bass type coloration or shad type coloration or things like that. But for the most part, these colors, if you're going to be throwing them, are going to work in almost every single situation that you might find yourself out on the water. If I'm looking at what color I need to be throwing, I'm more looking at water clarity and potentially what kind of forage these bass are eating on. But keeping it simple, especially at an early stage in your angling career, is going to help you a lot more than having 37 different colors in your tackle box. Color matters, but keeping it simple also matters. Learn the techniques before you learn how to micromanage your tackle box. Does this mean that these other lures are going to be bad in any way or you shouldn't buy them? God, no. I absolutely love throwing a topwater frog. A chatterbait, one of my favorite just walk around, cast around, figure out where those bass are type bait. There have been days where I have caught 15, 16, 17 bass within an hour just throwing a chatterbait. But I've also done the exact same thing throwing a wacky rig. So ultimately what this comes down to is the fact that this is a beginner style video. None of these other baits, except the buzzbait, none of them suck. I have my own gripes with buzz baits, but that's a completely different video. I do think they're a wonderful bait. I think that they definitely have their place. I've caught a lot of fish on buzz baits, but I don't like the fact that they don't float and they just sink. That's just a personal gripe for me. That doesn't mean they're a bad bait, but anyway. That doesn't mean that these are bad baits by any means. All this means is that those few that I recommended are the first ones that you definitely need to learn and that you definitely need to get comfortable with throwing, because that is going to lay down that foundation for the rest of your fishing career. Because if you learn how to throw a spinnerbait properly, that's going to line you up how to throw a chatterbait. If you throw a crankbait properly, that's going to line you up how to fish, large swim baits, because you can understand how to pop it, you can understand how to stop and reel, you can stop and go, you can how to work those treble hooks. That's going to set you up. You kind of get where I'm saying here. Understanding these types of things will help you in the long run. So go check out these lures. I'm going to leave all of these linked down below in my Amazon affiliate. I do earn commission off of that, but I'm not sponsored by any of these products. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. Go check these guys out. I'm going to leave everything linked below. And as per usual, have fun catching fish, people. Peace.